So I want to lay out a framework for that, for reform. And a key feature of it I just want to tell you about first is that it is not zero-sum. It does not pit rural farmers against rural eaters, or the interests of health and the environment against those of farmers, as I think you'll see. Here's the core idea. It's very simple. We need to wean the American food system off of its heavy 20th century diet of fossil fuels and put it back on a diet of contemporary sunshine. That's the big idea. Doing that, if we can succeed in doing that, it will do wonders for our health, not to mention the health of our communities and the health of the environment. Of course, it's easier said than done. It will require changes at every link in the food chain, from the farm to the table, and all the marketplace in between. But is it doable? Well, as long as the sun still shines. And if any part of the modern economy can be re-solarized, and we have to re-solarize whole other parts too, surely it is food, because it has that miraculous process at the beginning called photosynthesis. Now, I don't want to do a lot of history, but I just want to remind you how we got here. Since World War II, the emphasis has been, as I mentioned, to ramp up production. Okay, we needed to do this. We needed more calories. We had people after World War II very eager to eat the foods that they had given up during the war because there had been rationing. We had an explosion in population. We had an urbanization. We needed American farmers to grow more food. The way we went about it really was to convert World War II industries into this peacetime agriculture. So we took the munitions industry, the bomb-making industry, which was using ammonium nitrate to make bombs, and we turned that into the modern fertilizer industry. Okay, it's the same stuff as we learned in Oklahoma City a few years ago. We also took a lot of the nerve gases we had developed during the war and turned those into pesticides, also made with fossil fuel. And we, by moving these fossil fuel technologies into the food area, we were able to essentially replace farm labor with these inputs that drove production. And let us acknowledge the achievement of this. It's kind of incredible. 100 years ago, the average farmer was only feeding 20 other people besides his family. The average corn farmer in Iowa today is feeding 143 other people. These are the most productive humans who have ever lived. But of course, they can only be that productive because of cheap fossil fuel. That is really the linchpin of that system. But the achievement is remarkable, and we need to acknowledge that. We need to realize that the fact that you can go into a fast food restaurant and get that bacon double cheeseburger, french fries, and a soda, all 1,000 calories or whatever it is, for less than what you could earn at the minimum wage in 1 hour is, in the history of civilization, quite an achievement. And what that tells us is that the farmers met the challenge we set for them. Now we have a new challenge, because we can't count on that fossil fuel. And we now know that those cheap calories that we were so good at producing aren't necessarily the best ones for us to be eating. So we've learned something, and now we have to change course. So how do we get our food system off of oil? I'm going to outline just the broad out. I've gone into greater depth in this in some of my writings, and I can point you to it if you want to learn more. But let me just take you through the 3 steps where I think we need action. Okay? The first is on the farm itself. We need to change the set of incentives. Right now, the Farm Bill rewards farmers for growing monocultures. Lots of the same thing. Indeed, the Farm Bill makes it impossible for farmers, corn farmers, who might perhaps want to participate in a market like this and grow fresh produce. They are not allowed to do that. Or they lose, it's no longer corn or bean land. They give up their subsidies to grow real food that people can eat. That's, a shameful situation that needs to be changed. We need to go from subsidies that reward quantity to subsidies that reward quality. We need... I'm not, it's often suggested that when I talk about the fact we're subsidizing high fructose corn syrup and the subsidies are leading to an overproduction of unhealthy calories, that I favor eliminating farm support or farm subsidies. That's absolutely not true. I think what farmers do is so important that we need to support them. We have not had a successful free market in farming ever. And the government will play a role. The question is, what are we supporting? And that's what needs to change. I think we need subsidies that... I'm not a policymaker, okay? And we need other people in this movement who understand policy better than I do. But imagine if we had subsidies that rewarded farmers for how many different crops they have, for how many days of the year their fields are green, and therefore taking in solar energy and turning it into food and carbon in the soil. What if we rewarded farmers for how much carbon they're sequestering every year? That would be a very good metric of how sustainable their farming is and how much they're contributing to solving the climate change crisis. And I think we need to free farmers to grow things besides corn and soy and wheat and rice and cotton. We have plenty of that stuff, and it is not food. It is the raw materials of feedlot meat, high fructose corn syrup, processed foods of all kinds. So we need to change the incentives on the farm. We also need to bring animals back onto farms where they haven't been and bring crops back onto... we need really to depopulate the feedlots and get those animals back to the farm. Wendell Berry has a great line about, and he has a wonderful way of taking the Martian eye view of some of the crazy things we do. But he points out that when we took animals off farms and put them on giant feedlots, I'm talking about the 50,000 animal hog confinement or cattle feedlots, we took a solution and neatly divided it into two problems. And that solution is the closed nutrient loop, where the animals eat crop waste and produce fertility for the farm. And once we separated those two things, we had a waste problem on the farm, and we had a fertility problem. We had a waste problem in the feedlot, sorry. We were producing what should be a blessing, animal manure, and we had turned it into a toxic waste. And then on the other side, we had a fertility deficit on the farms that we had to remedy with fossil fuel fertilizers. So the challenge is, how do we go back, undo those problems, and go back to the solution that we had before that? So there's much that we need to do on the farms. But, farmers can't diversify unless consumers support them. Right now, many farmers only have one purchaser. When I talk to farmers in Iowa and I say, why are you just growing corn and soy? And they'll say, that's the only thing the elevator wants from me. The elevator won't buy broccoli. And that's absolutely true. So that's the second area we need to work on, the marketplace in which we're all operating. If farms diversify, they're going to need markets and infrastructure. The goal, I think, is to re-regionalize the food economy. That's not exactly the same as saying local. I'm not a locavore, strictly speaking. I think that solution is part of it, but we need somewhat bigger units. We need to be able to support mid-sized farms, not just small artisanal farms. And you do that through a regional food economy with farms big enough to supply institutions, schools, hospitals, prisons. And I think that's where the important work needs to be done. How can you do that? Well, let me talk about why you do that. Why is that a health matter? Well, there was a very interesting, I had a very interesting meeting with somebody a couple weeks ago in my office. He was an architect from MIT named Ken Kaplan. And he had gotten and again, he's an architect, knows nothing about food, knows nothing about farming, knows nothing about healthcare. But he was hired because he's got this good design head to put together a team from MIT and Columbia at the request of one of the big healthcare insurers, United Health. And they said, we want you to think outside the box and give us some solutions for the problem of childhood obesity. And they went out and looked at all the research on childhood obesity and the whole structure of the American food economy. And they came back with a really surprising and not at all intuitive idea after consulting hundreds of people in this whole area, in several whole areas. And that was that one of the ways, and perhaps the key way to address childhood obesity, would be to promote the concept of a food shed. Now, food shed, childhood obesity, what do these have to do with one another? Well, they felt that by regionalizing the food economy, you could reduce people's dependence on what I call edible food-like substances, processed foods from far away, and make access to real food, fresh produce, milk, cheese, real food, meat, make access to that, especially in the inner cities where the problems are most serious. That you could create a certain amount of sovereignty around food, that regions could have more control over their food destiny and be less dependent on these big buyers of agricultural commodities and processors of foods. And that by promoting the idea of a food shed, not that the food shed would feed all, supply all the needs of a city like Madison, but 60, 70%. That this would have a tremendous impact on health. It's a kind of wild idea. And United Healthcare was like, huh? We have to think about food sheds? We were hoping you'd come up with a pill or something, So there is a lot of work being done in this area, and it's very promising. How do you do it? Well, you do it in many, many ways. You build Four Seasons farmers markets so they can go all year long. You require federal and state and city institutions who spend billions on food to spend some small percent of their spending on food within 100 or 200 miles. A local food procurement can do so much to build this local food economy and support the community and support the local economy. Because right now that Cisco truck is taking your money out of this city and very far away. That money's got to stay here. What else can you do? I got a couple other ideas. Oh yeah, this is not a romantic one, but really important. You need really tough antitrust enforcement in the food industry. This is one of the most concentrated industries in America. There are now only 3 companies packing 85% of the beef in this country. You think it's hard to compete? It's hard to do grass-fed beef? Well, yeah, that's why. And they have a lock on all the slaughter facilities, and they can dictate prices to ranchers. There's a rule in antitrust theory that when you have 4 concerns or fewer controlling 40% of the market, you no longer have competition. And that holds true in seeds, where Monsanto is building a huge monopoly, in fertilizer, in grain milling, in dairy, in retailing, in beef, pork, chickens, and animal feed. If we just went back to Eisenhower's level and standards for antitrust enforcement, we would revolutionize the food economy. That's how far we've come. And farmers are not going to make it when price is being dictated by monopolies. So that's one thing we need to do. And there is evidence that this administration is sympathetic to that goal. They're holding hearings around the country on antitrust and food. And when one comes to this area, I urge you to go, because they're collecting information and making their plans on what industries they are going to try to break up. So that's another important thing. And we have to look at our nutrition programs, our so-called nutrition programs. Right now, that's what they're called. I'm talking about food stamps, now called the SNAP program. I'm talking about WIC, I'm talking about the school lunch program. All three of them, they're called nutrition programs, but they're not. They provide lots of calories, but not very healthy calories. People on food stamps now are more obese than people not on food stamps. It's bad for your health right now to get on food stamps, believe it or not. That wasn't the idea. We need to put nutrition at the center of these. How do we do that? I'm not sure. But, you know, what if, as many communities are trying, with your food stamps, you got another $30 voucher redeemable at the farmer's market? That would be a win-win situation. So there's a lot of creative thinking in that way, to use the nutrition programs to build up local food economies and put healthier food on people's plates. Because the problem is, if you don't have a lot of money and you're shopping for food, the rational thing to do is to buy junk food. Because every dollar you have, on the processed food aisles, you can get, for that dollar, 1,200 calories of chips and cookies and soda. But if you go to the produce section, you can only get 250 calories of carrots or broccoli. Okay? So if you're poor and you're trying to keep your family going, you're looking for calories, and you will be driven to those aisles. And we have to address that. We have to make the rational choice the healthy choice. So the guiding principle, though, of food sheds is that nations and regions should have some control, some sovereignty over their food destiny, and preserve the ability to feed themselves. This is not a selfish ethic. This is not just for us. We need to be preaching the same idea in the rest of the world. You know, we talk a lot about we need to grow lots of food in America to feed the world. Well, what really happens when we grow lots of food, too much food in America, surplus corn, surplus soy, is that we dump that subsidized grain on the world and compromise the world's ability to feed itself. Because we put farmers out of business. And we saw this in Mexico after NAFTA, when the flood of U.S. corn was admitted. Nearly 2 million Mexican farmers lost their livelihoods. Some of them ended up in the cities, poor, and many of them ended up in this country. This is what drove the wave of immigration over the last 10 or 15 years. So we have to understand that feeding the world is a complicated idea, and the important thing to think about is, how can we help the world feed itself? Now, the last area we need to address, because we are all implicated in this problem, is the food culture. Okay? We are all implicated in a culture of fast, cheap, and easy food that's grown, processed, and moved around with fossil fuel. We need to learn to eat from a shorter food chain. None of this works unless people cook. None of this works unless people know how to cook. How do we do that? Well, that's a big task, changing the food culture. Some of it's about storytelling, making people appreciate the value of really well-grown food grown in their community. But we're really going to have to teach our children. We have to teach our children how to eat lunch. I know Alice Waters was here a few years ago. I think she was here a few years ago. And, you know, she has this wacky idea, or so it sounds, that we should give kids credit for lunch. Academic credit. And when I first heard that, I said, that's pretty wacky. But of course, we give them credit for physical education. What, is that not an equally important life skill, to know how to eat lunch, to know what is at stake, what is going on? And, you know, I've come to see her point. I think she's absolutely right. We need to teach children about growing food with gardens in the schools. We need cooking classes. I don't think you should be able to graduate from 9th grade without knowing how to roast a chicken. I think that's a very important life skill. And we need to teach them how to eat. Now, this sounds very paternalistic. I'm saying sit kids down, give them a half hour, at a table, platters, tables, knives, and forks. This is also a very important life skill. Now, if it sounds paternalistic, the government should teach kids how to eat lunch. Well, consider that the government is now teaching them how to eat lunch. When you give kids chicken nuggets and tater tots and 10 minutes to eat, you are teaching them a way of eating. You are training the next generation of fast food customers. And we need to change the next generation of slow food customers. Now, we need to teach adults too. And one of the ways we do that is more transparency in our food system. What about a second calorie count on every package of food that tells you not just how many fat calories or carbohydrate calories are in it, but how many fossil fuel calories are in it? So you can look at a package of hamburger meat and see, yeah, it's a little cheaper, but geez, 55 calories of fossil fuel for every 1 calorie of meat. And then over here is this grass-fed meat, and hey, it's negative. Or it's got 5 calories of fossil fuel to do 1 calorie of, because all this carbon's been sequestered in the process. And that you could look at a soda and see how many calories of fossil fuel are in it. Not everybody would pay attention, not everybody reads calorie counts, but enough people would, and they would be able to make those often very complex decisions. Because there are times when food grown close to you has a bigger carbon footprint than food from far away, and it's important to know when that is true, because food miles are not the last word on this. You've got to look at the whole production system. But we have the science. We know how to do that, and I think that'd be very useful for teaching us. And then we need, the bully pulpit. We need, I think, on this cultural matter, we need exactly what we're getting from Michelle Obama. How great is it that there is now an organic garden on the White House lawn? And that the First Lady is speaking out regularly about the importance of fresh food, real food, getting away from processed food, and the importance of cooking for your family. She is, in a way, kind of redefining slightly our understanding of what it means to be a good parent. That includes cooking real food for your kids. That being a good parent is not necessarily taking your kids to McDonald's whenever they want to go. But it is like reading to your kids, a very important function of parenting. She's getting that message, of course. And I think she's raising consciousness about school lunch, and she has made this her issue. And I think that that's a very important thing. Gardening is not trivial. Gardening is a part of the solution. Gardens do a lot. They produce lots of healthy food. For people who say, I can't afford to eat organically, well, if you've got space for a garden, you can. The National Gardening Association just issued a study where they said a $60 investment in a home garden can yield $200 worth of fresh produce. That you will not find produce that is more nutritious, fresher, more delicious than the food you can grow yourself. At the same time, you'll be sequestering carbon. You'll be getting exercise without getting in your car to drive to the gym. And you will be, to paraphrase Wendell Berry again, breaking the hold of that cheap energy mindset that is telling you every day that you can't do anything for yourself, that you need an expert somewhere far away to entertain you, to feed you, to clothe you, to do everything for you. When you start using your body in support of your body by growing just a little bit of food, you realize that, you can do something for yourself. You don't need fossil fuel to make a move. So I think that's a really important, and it is a reminder how much is given. That the sun still shines down on our yards, and photosynthesis can still work its wonders wherever it does. It is the ultimate reminder of the free lunch in your yard every day. So, in conclusion, what happens now? Well, nothing unless we organize and bring pressure. Much stands in the way. Opposition is building. The kind of protests that we saw on Thursday are happening all over the country now, when I speak and when other people speak. The industry has woken up and taken notice. We're going through those stages that Gandhi talked about, of being ignored and then being ridiculed and then being fought. We're entering the fight stage. You know, a friend of mine had occasion to meet with Michelle Obama and Barack Obama. I've never met them. And to prepare a dinner for them and talk to them about some of these issues. And it was an interesting conversation, and he was making a lot of the points I'm making to you, a lot of points you would make, I think, to the President and the First Lady if you had a chance. And this is before they took office. This is right before they took office. And, you know, he was like, I get it, I get it, I get it, but I don't see a movement. Show me the movement. And he was basically indicating that he didn't feel enough pressure to move. And he understood the pressure on the other side. And he understood, too, how politics works. When I heard the story, it reminded me of, I don't know if you've read this history, but Lyndon Johnson meeting with Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King came to him and said, we need a Voting Rights Act. We need your help. In the same way that people have come to the President and said, we need your help reforming the food system. And Johnson said this. He said, make me do it. Go out and make me do it. That's how politics works. And that's what we need to do now. We need to go out and show them the movement. So let's go out and make them do it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very kind. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have time for a few questions, and Michael has graciously agreed to answer some. We have microphones, however, and please make sure you have a microphone so everyone can hear the question, so Michael can hear the question.